Okay. uh, for my project, I will be comparing Reagan's 1984 State of the Union with Obama's 2014 speech. Um, Both of their addresses focused on economic opportunity. Um, I feel like they both tried to, or felt the need to address a similar problem. Despite the time gap between the two, it was a very similar problem. They had similar priorities, but I think they had very different ways of addressing that problem. So with Reagan, the emphasis was on smaller government, reduced government, et cetera, to try to address the economic challenges that the country faced at the time. And with Obama, almost the inverse of that. Um, Obama emphasized um, using the government to create opportunities and to maybe generate growth. So jumping into their main issues, we'll start with Reagan. Reagan emphasized economic recovery, and I guess the vehicle that Reagan intended to use was limiting government. Um, so Reagan uh, emphasized tax cuts, kind of free enterprise, free market, I guess. Reaganomics, I guess reduced regulation in order to tackle some of the big economic issues of the time, which there was a priority on reducing inflation, creating more jobs, and I think overall, maybe a priority of Reagan and something that I think Reagan did a great job of was restoring confidence, I guess, from the public in the American economy. Um, as far as more policy related discussion points for Reagan, he emphasized spending restraint, tax reform, um, a balanced budget amendment, and a line item veto. As for how he delivered his speech, he I feel like Reagan was charismatic, confident, optimistic, um, humorous. Actually, there were some points that, uh, yeah, he just seemed personable. Um, and again, his priority was to uh, tackle the economic challenges via smaller government. As for Obama and Obama's main issue, um, very similar to Reagan, Obama was prioritizing the economy as well. I think Obama's angle was primarily wages and potentially almost class based, like economic mobility. And I actually really liked Obama's emphasis or you know description of how, despite on paper the economy was improving, despite that fact, it wasn't translating necessarily to your everyday American, the average worker. They weren't necessarily uh, experiencing those benefits. So Obama communicated, kind of shared the idea that despite profits being up, maybe stock prices are higher, things are going well, wages had remained very stagnant. And so, again, your average American wasn't necessarily benefiting from the existing economic situation. Uh, so, some policy that Obama proposed and emphasized and I guess promoted would be a higher minimum wage, equal pay, um, job training, retirement savings, and executive action. I do think with Obama and his speech and delivery, he felt maybe like there was some angst, which I think reflects the Democratic Party and in the tone at the time, and that, yeah, he was frustrated, I guess, with the current political climate. As for jumping into policy results real quick, um, Reagan successfully signed the Tax Reform Act of 1986. Inflation declined, unemployment declined. Um, as for maybe shortcomings for Reagan, the federal deficit remained very high. Debt increased. Um, the uh, the balanced budget amendment failed, and the line item veto did not pass. So overall, my judgment would be that I think Reagan definitely had some success, and there was tax reform, there was economic growth. It was a good time economically, but overall, he didn't accomplish all the things he set out to do, and there were definitely some failures there. Um, and just quickly, my sources on that section is the Reagan Presidential Library and the IRS and Congressional Budget Office. Okay, so as for Obama and Obama's policy results, um, Obama was able to raise wages for workers in like a federal contract sense, so different workers who had maybe federal contracts. Um, he was able to sign a bipartisan job training law, which was something that he had emphasized. And he also launched the MyRA retirement program. Some shortcomings of the Obama administration. The national minimum wage increase was rejected by Congress, and therefore he was not able to increase the minimum wage, which was a big emphasis of Obama, and I think something that he identified as a big pain point. Also, the MyRA program didn't have very good participation and was later discontinued. So when it comes to kind of judging, I guess, Obama's policy and success with what he had set out to do, I would say overall he had limited success, and it was a very divided time, but I don't think Obama was able to accomplish a lot of the things that he set out to do. And some of my sources on that would come from the archived Obama White House and the Department of Labor and Treasury. Okay. As for grading their speeches, I'm going to give Reagan an A-. Reagan was very clear, confident, humorous. The general tone was a little more optimistic, and I really think it landed with the audience. As for Obama, I'm going to go B+. I think a lot of Obama's ideas really resonated with me. I like the points he made. I do think Obama is naturally very charismatic, comes across well. A lot of his discussion points felt strong. I thought the conclusion where he honored Corey Remsburg landed well with the audience. But overall, it felt a little more rigid, potentially. It might be a word, and I don't know, not quite as I don't know that it landed with the audience quite as hard as Reagan's speech, truthfully. As for whether the issues are still relevant to this day, most definitely. I would say, economic concepts are always relevant to politics in America, but specifically with Reagan, there was a concern of taxes, debt, and government spending, which are highly relevant today. There's a lot of discussion around all three of those topics. And as far as Obama, I really think he keyed in on an important idea that's very relevant to a lot of Americans today, which is the idea of wages, wage inequality, cost of living rising while wages are relatively stagnant, etc. And ultimately, I think the conflict between their two speeches, while obviously they didn't have a conflict amongst themselves, but the notion of small government versus government involvement to solve economic problems, I think that's very much still alive today. As for audience reactions, just quickly, with Reagan, it felt like Vice President Bush was very supportive. And as for the Democratic speaker, O'Neill, he seemed respectful and bureaucratic and, overall somewhat receptive to the message. Yeah, there was definitely some agreements, but overall, I think the room was pretty bought into Reagan's speech. As for Obama, similar to Bush, Biden was very supportive of Obama, Vice President Biden. And as for, the Republican side felt not quite as bought in, maybe, I don't know. That's my perception, my read. Overall, I think Reagan's speech landed a little better. In conclusion, they both focused on similar concepts, wanted to do it in different ways, both put together strong speeches. Reagan's was slightly stronger, in my opinion. Thanks for your time.